My mother kicked me out at 16 to keep her twins. Years later, she showed up demanding $80,000 for their college, but I got a restraining order and sent her to jail. I'm 31 years old. I work in real estate, and I need to tell this story because what happened with my mother basically destroyed me for years. And now that I finally managed to get ahead, she shows up out of nowhere, demanding that I give her money, as if she had any right after everything. The thing is that my mom had me when she was 20, and my father, well, that guy left before I was born, literally never met him, and don't care to meet him. So I basically grew up with my mom and my grandparents, who lived nearby and helped us a lot. We weren't rich or anything, but we weren't bad off either. I mean, we had what we needed, and I never felt like I was missing something important, you know? My mom worked a lot, sometimes 2 jobs, but she was always there for me, or at least that's what I thought at the time. When I was like 8 years old, maybe a little older, my mom met Paul at her work or somewhere. I don't remember exactly where, but they started dating, and after a few years, I got married. I was about 12 when they officially got married. Paul was. Well, he wasn't bad at first, let's say, but it's not like we were super close either. He was kind of decent to me, but I never felt like he really wanted to be my father figure or anything. He was more like my mom's roommate who lived with us, you know what I mean? But my mom seemed happy and that was what mattered, I guess. So I didn't complain much, even though sometimes I felt like things had changed at home. Like it wasn't just mom and me against the world anymore, but now there was another person there, and the dynamic was different. Everything was relatively normal until I turned 16, and that's when my life went completely to shit. Sorry for the language, but there's no other way to describe it. Turns out my mom got pregnant, and not with 1 but 2, twins, whatever you want to call them. And at first I was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna have little siblings. I never had siblings, so it sounded interesting. But looking back, I should have noticed the signs, because my mom started acting weird with me, like distant, and Paul too. They avoided talking to me about important things, and when I asked them something about the future or about the babies, they answered me super vaguely. One day, I think it was like 2 months before the twins were born, my mom sat me down in the living room. Paul was there too, and she told me we needed to talk. And I already knew something bad was coming because nobody says we need to talk when they're going to give you good news. My mom looked at me with that serious face she made when she was about to say something she didn't want to say, and she blurted out, "We need you to leave the house." Just like that. No beating around the bush or anything. I sat there thinking she was joking or something, but she continued saying that with the twins on the way, they weren't going to be able to support me too, that it was too expensive, that they needed the space, that I was almost an adult and could manage on my own. Paul just nodded his head like it was the most logical thing in the world, and I couldn't process what I was hearing. I literally felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I tried to reason with her. I told her I could get a part-time job, that I could help with the babies, that I didn't take up much space or money, but she just shook her head and repeated that they'd already made the decision, that I had 2 weeks to find somewhere to stay. I don't know if you've ever been kicked out of your own home, but it's a horrible feeling. Like you feel completely betrayed and confused because how can the person who's supposed to take care of you and protect you just decide they don't want to do it anymore? I remember going to my room and just lying there, staring at the ceiling for hours, thinking about what I'd done wrong, if it was my fault somehow, if I'd been a bad son or something. I called my grandparents crying, and they got so angry with my mom. Literally, I'd never heard them so furious, and they told me to come to their house immediately, not to worry about anything, that they were going to take care of me. So basically, I packed my bags with the little I had. My grandparents came for me before the 2 weeks were up, and I left there without looking back. Well, that's a lie. I did look back and saw my mom standing in the doorway saying nothing, just watching. And that image stayed with me forever. Living with my grandparents was different, but good, in the good sense. I mean, they were older obviously and had their routines and all that, but they treated me with respect and never made me feel like a burden. My grandpa still worked part-time at a hardware store, and my grandma was a homemaker, and they gave me the guest room they had, which was small, but it was mine, you know? During that time, I finished high school living with them, and my mom basically disappeared from my life, like she called me twice in those 2 years, once to tell me the twins had been born, a boy and a girl, in case you were wondering, and once for my 17th birthday. But the conversations were super awkward and short. She talked as if nothing bad had happened between us, as if kicking me to the street was something normal. When I graduated from high school, my grandparents helped me apply to universities, and I got some scholarships. Not full ones, but something. And my aunt, my mom's sister who was always cool with me, offered to co-sign my student loans because my grandparents didn't qualify because of their age and financial situation. My aunt told me something I never forgot. She said, "You're going to get ahead and you're going to be successful. And when your mom realizes what she lost, it'll be too late." And I didn't really understand what she meant at the time, but now I understand perfectly. So anyway, I went to State University, studied finance because I was always good with numbers and because I wanted to have financial stability. I wanted to make sure I never depended on anyone or was in the precarious situation my mom put me in. College was tough. I'm not going to lie. I worked 30 hours a week at a campus coffee shop in addition to my full course load, and there were nights when I only slept 4 hours because I had to study for exams or finish projects. I ate a lot of ramen and cheap pasta, lived in the cheapest dorm available, and every cent I earned I saved or used for essentials. Zero fancy social life or anything like that. But I graduated. It took me 5 years instead of 4, because one semester I had to take fewer classes because of work, but I did it. And when I walked in that graduation ceremony and saw my grandparents and my aunt there, clapping and crying with pride, I felt like all the effort had been worth it. My mom didn't go, obviously. She didn't even send me a congratulations message. After graduating, I got an entry-level job at a commercial real estate company. I was making like $35,000 a year, which isn't much, but for me it was a lot, after having lived with almost nothing for years. I rented a small apartment, like a studio, in an area that wasn't very nice but safe, and I started paying my student loans religiously. Every month without fail, even if it meant eating chicken and rice for weeks. Little by little, I moved up in the company, took on more responsibilities, made contacts, learned the business, and like 4 years after I started, they promoted me to regional manager with a salary of $75,000 plus bonuses. I wasn't a millionaire or anything, but I was finally comfortable. I could save. I could treat myself to some things. I could help my grandparents with some things they needed. And I felt like my life was finally on the right track. And then, guess who shows up out of nowhere after almost 10 years without real contact? Yes, my dear mother. One afternoon I was at my apartment. I'd already moved to a better one in a decent area, 2 bedrooms because why not? And there's a knock on the door. I open it, and there she is. She looked older, obviously, with some gray hairs and wrinkles she didn't have before, and she smiles at me like we were best friends in the world. She says, "Hi, honey. Can I come in?" And I just stood there for a few seconds, processing the situation because I literally hadn't seen her in person in years. I only knew about her from comments from my grandparents who sometimes saw her at the supermarket or something. I let her in because I didn't know what else to do. And we sat in the living room, and she started with the typical awkward conversation of, "How are you? You look good. You have a nice place." And I just answered with monosyllables, waiting for her to get to the point, because clearly she didn't come just to catch up. And she got to the point. Boy, did she get to the point. Turns out the twins, who were like 14 years old at that time, were about to enter high school, and she was thinking about college, and she'd heard from my grandparents that I was working in real estate and doing well, and basically she came to ask me for money for the twins' college. Just like that. Without shame or anything. I stood there looking at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. Like, really? You kick me out of the house at 16 because supposedly you couldn't support me, you disappear from my life for years, and now you come to ask me to pay for your other kids' college? I asked her if she was joking, and she got all defensive, saying they were my siblings, that family helps each other, that I had managed to pay for my college, so clearly I had the means to help. I told her that I paid for my college with scholarships, loans I'm still paying, and working myself to exhaustion, that nobody gave me anything, and much less her. She got angry and started with the speech of, "I was a bad mother. I know, but I'm trying to make things right now, and that the twins aren't to blame for what happened between us. And technically she's right about that. They're not to blame. But it's not my responsibility either, you know? I told her to leave, that I wasn't going to give her a cent, and she stood up yelling that I was an ungrateful son. That after everything she did for me, what exactly? I'd like to know. I was turning my back on her when she needed me most. The truth is that in that moment, I felt a rage I hadn't felt in years. All the emotions I'd kept since I was 16 came out all at once, and I yelled back at her. I told her that she had turned her back on me first, that she threw me to the street as a minor, that she was never there for me when I needed her, and that now she came with the nerve to ask for favors. She left, slamming the door, and I stood there shaking from the adrenaline and emotion. And honestly, I thought that would be the end, that she'd understand the message and leave me alone. But no. Oh no, that would have been too easy. The emails started, like 3 or 4 a week. Long text messages where she blamed me for being selfish, where she said the twins would suffer because of me if they couldn't go to a good university, where she reminded me that she raised me alone and sacrificed a lot for me, lol, and where she basically tried to make me feel guilty about everything. I ignored the emails, but they kept coming, each time more desperate and more aggressive. Then the calls started. She left voicemails, saying she needed to talk to me, that it was urgent, that please reconsider my decision, and when I didn't respond, the messages became more threatening, like saying she was going to tell everyone how I abandoned my family, that she was going to ruin my reputation, things like that. Things got really bad when she showed up at my work. She came to the office one day asking for me at reception, and the receptionist called me saying there was a lady who said she was my mother and wanted to see me. I went down, thinking maybe there was a family emergency or something, but no, she just wanted to keep pressuring me about the twins' money. I told her to leave, or I'd call security. She started making a scene in the lobby, yelling that I was a bad person. How could I treat her like this? And people started turning and looking. It was super humiliating. I had to call security and they escorted her out, but not before she yelled that this wasn't over, that she was going to keep coming until I listened to her. And she kept her word. She started showing up at my apartment, knocked on the door at any hour, sometimes late at night, other times early in the morning before I left for work, and she just yelled from outside to open the door, that she needed to talk to me. My neighbors started complaining about the noise, and I was desperate because I didn't know how to make her stop. I talked to my grandparents and they told her to leave me alone, but she didn't listen to them. She said they had turned me against her, and that's why I was so cruel to her. The emails and voicemails kept coming, sometimes 5 or 6 a day, and some were her crying, saying she just wanted us to be a family again, and others were super angry, saying I was going to regret treating her like this. One night, I'd had like 6 months of this constant harassment already. I was getting to my apartment after work. It was like 8 at night, and she was there waiting for me in the hallway. I tried to ignore her and open my door, but she stood in front of the door, blocking my way, telling me she wasn't going to let me in until I promised to help her. I told her to move, or I'd call the police, and she said, go ahead, call them, and tell them how you abandon your family. Let's see who looks bad. The truth is, I was tired, physically and emotionally exhausted from all this, and I told her to please leave me alone, that I couldn't take it anymore, but she just stood there without moving. I tried to gently push her aside so I could put my key in the lock, and she went crazy. Literally. She started pushing me back, screaming, and then she scratched my face. I felt the immediate burn, and when I touched my cheek, I had blood. A neighbor heard the commotion and came out of his apartment, saw what was happening, and called the police immediately while telling my mom to calm down and get away from me. She kept yelling that I was a horrible son, that I deserved to be treated like this after how I treated her. Pure nonsense. The police arrived in like 10 minutes. I was sitting on the hallway floor with my neighbor helping me stop the bleeding from the scratches, and my mom was on the other side of the hallway still yelling incoherently. The cops tried to calm her down, but she started insulting them too, saying they didn't understand, that her son had betrayed her, and finally, they had to arrest her because she was resisting and getting aggressive with them too. I spent that night in the ER because the scratches, they were deep, and they needed to make sure they didn't get infected. They gave me antibiotics and told me there would probably be small scars, but nothing serious. The next day I went to court and requested a restraining order. I presented all the emails, the voicemails, testimonies from my neighbors, and my work about the harassment, and photos of the scratches, and the judge granted it without much problem. My mom had to spend a night in jail, and then they released her with the condition that she couldn't come near me or contact me in any way, and if she did, she would face more serious legal consequences. Since then, it's been like 6 months. I moved to a new apartment that nobody in my family except my grandparents and my aunt know where it is. I changed my phone number. I made all my social media private. Basically, I disappeared for her. My grandparents told me she was going to their house for a while, asking them to tell her where I was, but they refused and eventually she stopped going. I don't know what happened with the twins, if they ended up going to college or not, and honestly, it's not something that keeps me up at night. I know it sounds cold, but I had to build my life from scratch without anyone's help. When I was 16, they're 16 now and have 2 parents who supposedly support them. They're better off than I was. Sometimes I feel guilty. I'm not going to lie. There are days when I wonder if I was too harsh, if I should have listened to her more, if maybe I should have helped even a little. But then I remember that night when she left me at my grandparents' house without looking back. I remember all the years she wasn't there. I remember how she only showed up when she found out I had money, and the guilt goes away. My aunt told me recently that what I did was set healthy boundaries, that I don't have to feel bad for protecting myself from someone who hurt me, even if that person is my mother. And I think she's right. Or at least that's what I tell myself to be able to sleep at night. Last week, I was organizing some papers and found an old photo of when I was a kid, like 7 years old, with my mom at some park. We were both smiling, and she looked happy. And I started thinking about how we got from that moment to this. At what point things broke so badly that there's no way to fix them anymore. I don't have an answer. Honestly, I just know that the decisions she made had consequences, and those consequences include that I don't want her in my life anymore, that I don't trust her, and that I have no intention of being part of her family again. It sounds harsh when I say it like that, but it's the truth. And after years of therapy, yes, I went to therapy, best decision of my life, I learned that it's okay to put my well-being first, that I don't have to sacrifice myself for people who weren't there when I needed them just because we share blood. Now I'm focused on my career, on maintaining the healthy relationships I have with my grandparents and my aunt, and on building the life I want without the shadow of all this family drama. I don't know if my mom will ever understand the damage she caused. Probably not. People like that rarely realize, but it's not my problem anymore. It's not my responsibility to make her understand or forgive her or anything, and that, honestly, feels liberating. I keep moving forward. That's all I can do.